Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal list of Haydn's London Symphonies. All 12 of those suckers. You're not going to believe this one. With 12 different conductors and orchestras. No repeats. This has been so much fun to do. Oh my God, I've had such a good time. I can't even tell you. You know, Haydn is a marvel. He's still, I think, to this day, not really understood. His range and curiosity and questing spirit makes his music even more difficult to do than Beethoven's, and certainly more difficult than Mozart's. In a very real sense, he had a keener sense of the potentialities of the orchestra than anybody who came before, and very few people who came after him, maybe Mahler, sort of, because he uses fabulously intriguing orchestral effects, but he uses them in a way which always furthers the musical argument. They're never there just for themselves. They actually do stuff musically, and we're going to talk about them within the context of each symphony because it helps to explain why there really is no one single Haydn symphony cycle or even Haydn London symphony cycle that's 100% consistent. There just isn't. It's more difficult to do than Beethoven cycles. There's always something there that trips someone up, that the conductor can't quite encompass. He can't wrap his own brain and experience around Haydn's practically unlimited brain and experience. And that's really what it takes to do Haydn well. Never mind to do all 106 or 107 of the other symphonies. It's an amazing thing. There's nobody like him. There's no body of work that covers so much expressive ground and so much ground technically in terms of the different sonorities that you have to be willing to ask your players to make. It's amazing. There are a few things that happened in later music that Haydn didn't anticipate, and a lot of those things are in these London symphonies. And so I've picked 12 different conductors, really for a lot of reasons. One of them, of course, is the usual reason. That is, I don't want to stick to just one person. I want you out there as viewers to get a sense of what the available possibilities are, who the players are, who are the guys who do this. Some of these performances come from larger sets. Some of them are one-off individual performances. They're all superb, and some of them were really hard to find because, like I said, Haydn's symphonies are sui generis. They're not like anybody else's, and they're also not all like each other. And it's just a marvelous sound world. I can't even tell you, he's, for those of you who haven't quite gotten your brain around Haydn yet, you don't know what you're missing. You got to get into Haydn. You just have to. You have to be able to understand where he's going and what he's doing because it's not difficult. He's very, very listener friendly. He wants you to follow him, but he's like no one else in the universe. And if you come to him thinking you're going to hear sort of Mozart, kind of Beethoven, it's not. You have to listen to Haydn because he's Haydn. And if you do, the world will be your oyster, the musical world. So let's just get started with number 93. The London Symphonies, as you know, were the symphonies that he wrote in London. Number 104 is called The London Symphony, but they were all written for his concerts in London over about a 3-year period. He went there, spent a lot of time, went back, then he went back for a second visit. They were all composed between around 1792, 93, and 1795. And after that, he wrote no more symphonies. He concentrated on vocal music, on the late masses, the oratorios, and the last string quartets. So this was his statement as to what the symphony could be. And what a statement it was. So, number 93, we have to mention Zell. You got to start with Zell. Zell, unfortunately, only did the first 6 of the London Symphonies. Oh, God, I wish he'd done them all. It would have been so wonderful. Well, let's see. He also did 104, and he did 99. So he did a couple others. But the first six are 93, 94, 95, 93 through 98. Plus, Zell did two more. And he did the Oxford Symphony, that's 92, and he did 88. So he did a bunch of them. But what a great Haydn conductor he was. He was made for this. And for those who think that Zell was this sort of miserable guy, listen to the slow movement of 93. It's the one, it actually was a commercial for like Verizon or something like that, this slow movement. But it has the most obscene imitation of a fart that you have ever heard in your life. And the only performance, not even Harnoncourt, the only performance that really lets it rip is Zell. He is the only guy. It is absolutely hideously vulgar. And you've got to hear the slow movement of 93 in Zell's performance. And of course, the rest of it is magnificent. And if you have the Zell box, you have these. If you don't, you should have these. Zell is an unbelievably great Haydn conductor. He understood the difference between Haydn and Mozart. And that is really something, especially in a conductor of that generation who grew up sort of regarding Haydn as a Mozart wannabe, But Zell got the point completely. He really did. And he realizes all of Haydn's humor, and the playing is incredible. But wow, this 93 is legendary among Haydn fans, so you should know about it, the Zell 93. If you meet a Haydn person, just look at them and say, Zell 93, and they'll go, aha, you're serious, you really know your stuff. That's like Haydn gossip. It really is. There's some more Haydn gossip in here too. It's just great. All right, the Surprise Symphony. 94 is the Surprise Symphony. The Surprise Symphony has more surprises than just the surprise, by the way, just the loud thwump. I mean, there's another sudden timpani eruption in the finale that's quite startling. And actually, in the first movement, this is the first ever symphony that we're aware of or that we care about that requires the timpanist to retune while the music is actually going on. Because before Symphony number 94, all timpani were tuned tonic and dominant. That is the main key and the key of fifth higher. And that was it. And they were stuck there for as long as the music was going because they didn't have pedals like we have now, which makes retuning very easy, or chains that you can do it this way. Sometimes you'll see. They were little military drums. You rented them from your armory and you got them from the barracks. And the timpanist was probably from the barracks, and tuning was not something that he was used to doing. And you got them set up from the very beginning and hoped that you were right and that it stayed that way. But Haydn actually demands that the timpanist retune for the development section and then tune back in the first movement of the Surprise Symphony. And that is one of its main surprises. Haydn, by the way, was a timpanist. Among his other qualities, of course, he played the piano, he played keyboard, and he played the violin, but he was also a real, genuine timpanist. That was his first instrument. Back home, he played the toy drum, and he loved the timpani. Great man. So, who do we get for the Surprise Symphony? Franz Bruggen. I love Bruggen's Haydn. Bruggen was one of these guys. I mean, these are period instrument performances, but the reason they're great isn't because they're period instrument performances. They're great because Bruggen was nuts. So that's what makes them great. Bruggen was a character. One of the crazy things about the whole period instrument movement is that for all of their avowed, emphasis on historical accuracy and fidelity and blah, 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 and how the instruments are played and what they're made of and all that nonsense. The one thing that they all have that Haydn's orchestra never had was a full-time conductor. And the one thing they never did was rehearse. Haydn wrote that famous letter saying, oh, gee, it would be really nice if you have at least one rehearsal before you play my symphonies because of the many unusual and new effects that I'm trying to achieve. That was when they were going to do his Oxford Symphony in Oxford University when he got his honorary doctorate. So this was, these performances are wonderful because Bruggen was a quirky conductor who liked to tinker. And he liked instrumental color. And so he's using period instruments, but he's using them in a way that realizes all the color in these scores. It's the kind of thing that you need a conductor to do. And he does it. And he is as romantic and unidiomatic and inauthentic a human being as ever stood before a period instrument orchestra. And that's what makes these performances great. They're all terrific. And if you're looking for, Haydn's symphonies on period instruments, the best guy so far and still is Bruggen. These are terrific performances, and his Surprise Symphony is wonderful. It has a geniality, an expressive character. He really gets his players to characterize the music. He doesn't rush. He savors every morsel. He's just great, just great. All right, 95. Now we're coming back to modern instruments. Eugen Joachim. Joachim was another wonderful Haydn conductor. This set of the 12 London Symphonies with the London Philharmonic is one of the classic sets of Haydn's London Symphonies. But Joachim did a lot of them more than once. And if you can get his 95 on Berlin Classics with the Staatskapelle Dresden, it's even better. It's even better recorded. It's a knockout. But so's this. I mean, these are great performances. 95 is the least popular of all of the London Symphonies. It's the only one in a minor key. It's for some reason, it's never quite caught on. It's a wonderful work. There's no question about that. And the finale is glorious. The finale is a contrapuntal whiz-bang tour de force that makes the finale of Mozart's Jupiter Symphony. I mean, it really gives it a run for its money. It really does. It's a great finale. And Joachim was wonderful at it. He conducts it with such impetus and at the same time clarity. And if you hear the Staatskapelle Dresden do it, it's unbelievable. This is really good. All right, 96. 96 is the one that's nicknamed the Miracle, even though it wasn't the symphony at which the miracle happened. The miracle supposedly happened during number 102, which has no nickname. But the actual miracle apparently was that the chandelier in the concert hall crashed to the floor and would have killed everybody there, because these weren't such large rooms. Well, actually, the Hanover Square rooms where Haydn played this music in his second London visit, they held about 800 people. I mean, that concert hall held about 800 people, which is a pretty big room. And of course, they didn't use deodorant, and they didn't have toilet paper, and they all stank to high heaven, and they had no ventilation. And all of the lighting, of course, was by candlelight. So that meant it all reeked of tallow or whatever disgusting substance they used to make it. And it was smoky, and the men wore swords and the women wore hoop dresses. And the whole thing must have been just unbelievable. And the only place you could probably breathe was if you were in the orchestra. And apparently the audience had pressed forward because people stood up and walked around and chatted and did stuff. They bought snacks. They sold peanuts, get your red hots. Boom, Haydn's 96th. And they all pressed forward to hear the music more intently, and the chandelier came crashing down and no one died. That was the miracle. Anyway, 96 is actually the first of the London Symphonies. It was the one that Haydn composed first. And the performance that I am going to recommend, because it's just a knockout, is Max Gobermann's. Now, Max Gobermann was going to do the world's first complete Haydn cycle, but complete Haydn cycles have always been cursed, and Gobermann dropped dead before he finished them. Sony reissued this box of all the symphonies that he did. He did very few of the late ones. He only did, let's see, what is it, 92, 96, 98, 107, 108. That's all he did. He was not able to do more than that. It's a shame. He was a wonderful conductor, a wonderful Haydn conductor. These are really hot performances, and his 96 is a knockout, as I've said. Absolutely first class. So if you can get it, I mean, these are sort of collector's items among Haydn people. So I feel I have to bring them up. And aside from the quality of the performance itself, but you will find other wonderful 96s if you can't find this one, among them Harnoncourt, who we'll talk about later. 97. Now, 97 is one of those symphonies that, again, people for some reason don't don't talk about it very much. It's in C major. It's kind of militant. It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. It has in its slow movement, it has a long, long passage where the violins have to play on the bridge, which makes a very raspy, snarly sort of sound. It's a wonderful sound that Haydn exploited in this particular symphony, and the performance I'm going to recommend may surprise you. It's Jaap van Faden with the Netherlands Radio Chamber Philharmonic. I mean, this is quite a fine performance. And I have to say, I've heard a lot of Van Sweden, especially since he's taken over the New York Philharmonic, and I haven't been impressed with anything that I've heard. I really haven't. But this Haydn disc, it's on Exton from Japan, is really, really good. Really surprisingly good. I was very impressed, and I am happy to recommend it for those of you who have access to recordings on this label. The sound is fabulous, and the performances are full of guts and gusto, just like you need to do with Haydn. So that was a very, very pleasant surprise. We're going to have a more normal recommendation for 98. Now, 98 is an absolutely delicious piece. It's really Haydn's tribute to Mozart in some ways, the slow movement. Now, the slow movement is based on God Save the Queen. It sort of goes do, 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 do. And then it does Mozart. It's beautiful. Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. But 98 is a symphony that seems to be difficult for a lot of people to do. I don't know why they have such trouble doing it. It's got one of Haydn's very best jokes at the very end. The joke is that the piano, the forte piano in that case, or harpsichord, is given a solo, which some people have claimed means that the keyboard should have been playing along with the orchestra the whole time. I don't believe that's true. I don't. And the reason I don't believe that's true is because in London in those days, concerts were not just orchestral events. They had singers, they had soloists, they had improvisations by traveling virtuosi. All kinds of things happened. So you had to have a keyboard instrument. And they played a lot of earlier music that required it. So Haydn would have been there, the keyboard would have been there to accompany whatever else was happening, in the program that was not his symphony. And he would have sat at the keyboard and led the symphony. And if he needed to play along, he would have played along. We don't know where he played along. We don't know what he played. He wrote no continuo parts for any of his symphonies, none of them. So there's a consensus that there should have been sort of a keyboard around, but what it did, nobody quite knows. And of course, what proves that is the fact that Haydn wrote this solo at the end of number 98, because the keyboard doesn't do anything until the very end when he comes in going tinkle, 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 tinkle. It's adorable. Just to give the guy something to do. It's a joke, of course. And because it's a joke, we know that the keyboard would not otherwise have been playing, or if it did play, it did so very, very discreetly, just to hold everybody together or fill in the parts where maybe they got lost. Who knows? Anyway, it's a lovely symphony. It has a fascinating first movement too, because the opening theme of the Allegro is simply a speeded up theme, a speeded up version of the slow introduction. So they're very tightly bound and unified, and unifying the introduction and the Allegro is something that Haydn began to do a lot of in these symphonies, and it's very, very effective and wonderful in this symphony. I am at a loss as to why so many people have problems with it. Bernstein's performance of it is particularly flabby, by the way. And that's what I mean when I tell you, you very, very seldom find complete sets of the London Symphonies or any groups of Haydn symphonies that are of a uniformly consistent level of excellence. Davis's London Symphonies with the Concertgebouw are very, very good. They are beautiful. They are musical. He was, of course, a superb Mozart conductor, and this is the most Mozartian of all the London Symphonies. And so that's why I chose Colin Davis with the Concertgebouw, because of that relationship between Haydn and Mozart. 99. We're getting there, folks. 99. Now, for 99, Bernstein all the way. This is just such a knockout of a performance. Oh my God, it's marvelous. This is another symphony that sort of gets lost in the shuffle because it doesn't have a nickname. The ones that don't have nicknames tend to get ignored because they're just harder to remember because they don't have nicknames. You want to go say, I want to go hear 99. People think you're watching reruns of Get Smart, but no, Not at all. It's Haydn Symphony Number 99, a glorious piece with a really, really zippy finale. And the Symphony Number 99 is the first of the second set of London symphonies, and these are the first symphonies in which Haydn was able to take advantage of clarinets, which joined his woodwind section for the very, very first time. Mozart, was living in Vienna, and in Vienna he had the Statler brothers who played the clarinet, so he was always able to use clarinets. Whenever he could get his hands on them, he used clarinets. Haydn wasn't so lucky. He was writing for the Paris symphonies are for Paris. The last symphonies before the London symphonies were actually all composed for Paris. And so he did not have clarinets on hand, and he never had them in Esterhazy. He had English horns sometimes, which was kind of odd. So now he has clarinets, and you get to hear them in the finale of this very symphony. He uses them very carefully because apparently the clarinet players in London were not very good, not as good as the ones in Vienna. But Bernstein, of course, is a great, great Haydn conductor. And aside from 98, which is, like I said, somewhat flabby, his Haydn London symphonies are almost uniformly magnificent, and it's wonderful to hear them. And 99 is the way to go if you want to hear Bernstein at his best in Haydn. 100 is the Military. Now, the Military is the first symphony ever to use extra percussion. Actually, his brother, Michael, wrote a symphony that uses extra percussion too, but it's sort of a theatrical piece, as well as being a symphony or derived from that. But Haydn's Military Symphony is important not because it has a military movement that uses percussion. It's important because he uses the percussion in the finale for no reason other than to use the percussion. In other words, he's using them for color, for the pure timbral joy of having bass drum, cymbals, and triangle smashing away at the end of the symphony. And that is the radical move. That's the thing that made the difference. Beethoven remembered it, you may recall, in the finale of the Ninth Symphony, where he uses the Turkish instruments, that's bass drum, cymbals, and triangle, for the actual march section, and then he brings them back at the end to add to the joyous hubbub in the closing measures. And that was a big deal because the difference between Haydn's handling of these percussive effects and Mahler's handling of these percussive effects and other people is that they use them in a way that is purely musical, that adds to the musical discourse, that enhances the expressive effect of the music. They aren't special effects pasted on. They aren't programmatic. In the second movement, they are. In the second movement, he's actually recreating a battle, battle music and a battle scene in a sense. In the finale, he's not. He's not doing it at all. He's using them in the abstract, expressive sense. And that's what really matters because, percussion instruments were banished from the symphony orchestra for like 100 years after this, practically, except for a triangle periodically, because they were regarded as not symphonic. They were regarded as distracting the listener from the intellectual or the abstract expressive argument, which was supposed to be just emotions and human feelings, and make them think of other things like traffic or horses or birdies or all these other things. But Haydn was able to integrate these effects into his orchestration generally and use them for purely musical purposes. And in that respect, he was so far ahead of everybody else who was working in symphonic music. In some ways, he really had no peer. It really didn't. It's just amazing the way he did it. So that's the Military Symphony, and the performance that I'm waving around and don't even mention. I'm so interested in the music, I forget about who's playing it. Scherchen! I talked about this in a separate talk. This is Scherchen's most insane Haydn disc. This is nuts. This is nuts. The battle is a crashy, bashy, absolute, massacre. And the finale is so fast that the orchestra really can't play it. They're hanging on for dear life, trying to keep up with him. It's in stereo. You have to hear it. It's just so much fun. It's so much fun. And if you want to hear something that's slightly more normal, you can always go for Harnoncourt or someone like that, or Bruggen. They're all wonderful performances. But Scherchen was special. It was special. It really was. It's just the craziness and the joy that is Haydn, and encapsulated in a wonderful, wonderful way. Now, 101 is the clock. The clock symphony, that has the second movement that goes tick, tock, tick, tock, tick, tock, do, 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 do. Oh, it's just wonderful. And at one point, the tick-tocking is with the flute and the bassoon, so it's like boop, 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 right? I mean, it's just the most delicious, delicious movement you've ever heard in your life. And for deliciosity, sheer deliciousness, no one did Haydn better than Thomas Beecham. Is this right side up? Yes, it is. He's sideways. I'm right side up. His face is like this. He's over here. Thomas Beecham's Haydn. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. He doesn't use modern additions. This is old-fashioned trumpets and drums are like way in the back somewhere. It's period instrument. People will go crazy. But for sheer stylishness meaning elegant phrasing, just shaping of a melody, things that people don't do anymore, especially period instrument people. They really don't do it. Bruggen does it, by the way, once in a while. But Beecham was the master. Absolutely the master. These performances make you smile just because the playing is so shapely and so instantly expressive of what the melody is trying to do that it just feels so right. It's so right. And you hear that just to the nth degree in the slow movement of the clock symphony as Beecham conducts it. And Beecham is another one of those guys. You've got to hear some of his Haydn. He was a marvel. Absolutely a marvel in Haydn, and it's just tremendous. So he did all the London Symphonies. Thomas Beecham, with his own Royal Philharmonic, a great, great classic set, which fortunately is still around in various formations. Now, number 102, we have another classic cranky old German. Now, 102 is another amazing piece of music. The slow movement is the first ever to use muted trumpets and muted timpani, and with a solo cello underneath. It's just glorious. And it happens to be a transcription of a movement that Haydn wrote for piano trio. And wow, what a great, great movement it is. But the thing about 102 is that it's a compact symphony. It's the most Beethovenish symphony that Haydn wrote. I mean, it's pure pre-Beethoven. If Beethoven had written it as his first symphony or second symphony, you would have said, okay, there's something new and special. It's a really dynamic, dramatic, exciting symphony, especially in the first movement. And if you want to do so, you got to play it like Beethoven. You play it as hard as you can and as Beethovenish as you can, with big contrasts and chunks of rhythm just hewn out of granite. Yes, the granite guy, Klemperer. Klemperer is your guy for 102. Klemperer's Haydn is pretty special too, except for the really, really late stuff that he made after he was dead. He didn't stop conducting. They propped him up in a chair while he was dead, like this, and they played, and they gave him credit for it on the record cover. That's what happened with Klemperer. But his 102 is stunning. Absolutely stunning. He plays it. He gets it. He gets the point. He plays it just like he plays his Beethoven. And the result is fantastic. And that is, it's one of the special qualities of Haydn. You can play it like that, and it sounds right. It works. It absolutely works. There's none of that prissy, fussy, classical, effete, rococo, none of that with this music. None of that. You have to play it 100% pedal to the metal, balls out, let it rip. And Klemperer does. It's just wonderful. I mean, he conducts it like he conducts the Eroica, and that's the way it should be done. That's absolutely the way it should be done. Now we come to 103, the drum roll. Now, the drum roll is called the drum roll because it begins with a drum roll. But what some people have realized is that Haydn just has a fermata over the drum roll part, and it's called intrada, which of course means introduction. And obviously a single roll is not much of an introduction and with a fermata. And what actually happened, we believe, or the period instrument people would insist, and I think they're right, is that there was an improvised drum fanfare or tattoo, a real introduction played by solo timpani that leads to that fermata and the roll. It used to be performances just had a very soft roll at the beginning, because the beginning is very ominous, and that was the entrada, or sometimes they'd start with a loud roll and then make a diminuendo, but no, Harnoncourt, here he is, Harnoncourt with the concerto, my man, he tells them to play a real entrada, and the timpanist improvises a whole fanfare type thing that ends, and it's so right. You just know that's what it has to be. It's a surprise. It's brilliant. It's totally Haydn-esque. It's exactly what you think ought to be done, and Haydn didn't have to write it because he wanted the player to improvise it. Obviously, there's no reason to ever do it any other way, now that Harnoncourt has showed us how. And this is his cycle with the concerto. It's got its very strange moments. It really does. I mean, it's Harnoncourt. He does weird things. Quite often, he does weird things. And there are wonderful, fabulous performances. 96 is great. So if you don't find Goberman, you can get this one. And 100 is great. And 103 is great. 104 is weird. It's a little bit weird. Well, the minuet is about 10 times faster than anyone else has ever done it. But, but again, the performances are full of personality, and you've got the concerto, which is amazing. So, Harnoncourt for the drum roll symphony. And now we come to 104, the London Symphony that is called the London Symphony. Here's a choice that may surprise you. And it surprised me. I have been so impressed with it, though. It's absolutely first class. Nicholas Mcgegen with the Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra on its own label, Philharmonia Baroque, which means it should be available, unless they've disappeared. I don't know. But boy, this is a great record. You get 104, 101, and 88. And all three performances, these are live recordings, and they are knockouts. And I really recommend that you get this disc no matter what. I mean, whatever you think about any of the rest of this stuff, grab this and listen to it, because it is wonderful, wonderful Haydn playing and conducting, full of color and energy. It's done in period style, but with tons and tons of character and shapeliness of phrasing, and even some warmth to the string tone, limited, but it's there. It's really wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. Nicholas Mcgegen does a fantastic job in these symphonies. And to round off your Haydn cycle with number 104, you have to remember that there are also symphonies A and B, which are early. So then sometimes we call them 106 and 107, or 107 and 108, or whatever. And there's the Sinfonia Concertante, which is 105. So here is a great performance of number 104. Nick Mcgegen and the Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra. Very proud of them. And I even decided to throw in as a special bonus, because you've been sitting with me this long, the Symphonia Concertante, the symphony number 105. This Haydn wrote because he was in competition with his pupil Pleyel, and Pleyel was from France, and in France they liked concertante symphonies, which are concerti grossi. They're symphonies with a small group of soloists, usually. The most famous one, of course, is Mozart's double concerto, the Symphonia Concertante for violin and viola, which is, glorious. It's the sort of ultimate version of the genre after Haydn's 105, which is scored for violin, cello, oboe, and bassoon. It has a little quartet of soloists, 2 winds, a treble and a bass, and 2 strings, a treble and a bass. And it's a wonderful work, and I just decided to give you good old Antal Dorates. Why? Because I think this is a good place to end it. Dorati was the first guy to do all the Haydn symphonies. There have been a few cycles since, a couple, maybe 3, 4. Dennis Russell Davies, it's disgusting. There was the Fischer, which is actually quite good, except for the London symphonies, which were done early and recorded in a bathroom. They're awful. And then there's the part period instrument, part modern instrument, sort of the Universal set, which has all the Brueggen recordings in it, thank God, plus a lot of others like Hogwood and those people, which are So, the only one that isn't is Dorati. It has held up amazingly well. really amazingly well. It sounds terrific still. It's one of those sets where you listen to some of them. I mean, they're variable, like all of them. Some come off better than others, but on the whole, the standard of quality is very, very high. It's consistent in terms of personnel and sound from beginning to end. It was a milestone. And I think it's worth it to recognize the milestone that it is. The Naxos cycle, also, I've been using it in some of these talks, is really quite good. I've been pretty impressed with almost everything I've heard. It's really sounding pretty good. And I have to listen to it more carefully to see what my final judgment is. But Naxos is a good deal so far from what I've heard. But every Haydn collection needs Dorati. And so for the Symphonia Concertante, I'm sticking in Dorati. Just a shout out and a mention to one of the most intrepid and bold explorations of the most intrepid and bold body of music in all of Western history, bar none. So that, my friends, is my ideal selection of Haydn London Symphonies. Thank you for listening. Keep on listening and take care. See you next time.